There are places on Earth that were not built just to be seen, were erected to be felt. Among the green hills of southern England, where the wind seems to hold deepest secrets older than time, a circle of stones stands that defies logic and memory human. Stonehenge. Silent, immense, inexplicable. Some say it marks the sunrise. Others claim that it was a temple, observatory, or altar. But perhaps Stonehenge is something even deeper, a mirror, a reflection of that the human being was, is, and can still be. If you feel like certain things are no coincidence, maybe this video is what you needed to hear. Because every stone there seems to talk. Each one rests at an exact point, as if obeyed an invisible score. And there's something in your disposition that watches us back, remembering that before we knew how to measure time, we felt it. Before calculating the sky, we contemplated it. Who raised these stones? And more importantly, why? Archaeologists speak of Neolithic people. Legends speak of wizards and gods. But between fact and myth there is a bridge, made of intuition, vibration, memory ancestor. Perhaps Stonehenge was not just built, but remembered. Imagine men and women 5,000 years ago, moving blocks of stone 40,000 years ago, tons over tens of kilometers, no machines, no writing, only guided by something that science calls impossibility, and that the soul recognizes as purpose. Every solstice, when the sun rises aligned with the main portal, something awakens there. Tourists see an astronomical spectacle, but whoever remains silent hears something else. The echo of an ancient called, perhaps from Earth, perhaps from the stars. What if Stonehenge wasn't just a monument, but a reminder, a point of encounter between what is below and what is above, between the human and the cosmic? Today we will pass through this portal, not to find definitive answers, but to bring us closer to the mystery that lies before us, created. Because perhaps the builders of Stonehenge didn't build a temple for the gods, but a mirror to the soul of man himself. Before there were temples, cathedrals, or sacred books, man already knelt before the earth. The ground was an altar, the wind was prayer, and each stone a fragment of the divine. In Stonehenge, this ancient reverence still vibrates, as if the entire planet were breathing through its columns. Archaeologists say it all started around 3000 BC, when Neolithic people they began erecting stone, circles and ceremonial mounds across Britain. But the question that echoes is not when, but why. Why did you choose that field? Flat, surrounded by gentle hills and underground streams. Why align the stones with so much precision, as if they were obeying an invisible map? Recent studies show that the underground of Stonehenge pulses with magnetic energy unusual. Lines of force, known as ley lines, appeared across the region, connecting ancient sacred sites such as Avebury, Glastonbury, and Silbury Hill. Coincidence? Or forgotten wisdom? Perhaps the builders did not seek the sky first, but rather the heart of the earth. These people lived in intimate communion with their environment. They felt the tides, heard the wind. They watched the birds to predict rain. For them, building was not about dominating the nature, but dialogue with it. The stones were extracted tens of kilometers away, some from mountains in Wales, and transported with ropes, logs, and pure determination. No modern calculation explains exactly how this was possible. But perhaps the secret is not in strength, but in harmony. Researchers discovered that certain rocks used at Stonehenge, the so-called bluestones, emit slight sound vibrations when played. They sing. The old ones, perhaps they chose these stones not only for their resistance, but for their frequency that emanate. Imagine a circle of monoliths that vibrates like a sacred instrument, responding to the touch of the wind, the human voice, or the sound of drums, a space that it literally resonates with the earth. In spiritual language, this would not just be engineering. It would be listening, an architecture made to capture the invisible voices of the planet. Perhaps Stonehenge was a great instrument of attunement, between body and cosmos, between humans and the soil that supports them. But there is something even more curious. Beneath the Stonehenge site, recent excavations revealed traces of ancient wooden circles, animal bones, fragments of charcoal, and carefully arranged human remains. Were they rituals? Goodbyes? Passage celebrations? Everything indicates that the place was used in ceremonies that marked the cycle of life and death. For those people, being born and dying were just phases of the same movement, just as the sun sets to be reborn the next day. The earth was the womb and the tomb. The cycle was eternal. And perhaps by raising those stones, they wanted to leave a reminder recorded on landscape, everything, that lives returns. Today, satellites observe Stonehenge from above as a perfect geometric point, but whoever kneels before him feels something deeper, an ancient pulse, almost human, as if the ground still held the memory of those who heard it before us. If something inside you is awakening, stay until the end. The answer may be here, not in the words, but in the silent vibration between the stones. And perhaps, at the next sunrise, as you see the light cross the sacred circle, you will realize it's not just the rocks that have been standing for millennia. It's the earth itself trying to remember who we are. When the first ray of the solstice sun passes through the central corridor of Stonehenge, something happens, not just in the landscape, but in the hearts of those who observe. It's as if the time stopped, and for a brief moment, heaven and earth breathed together. For centuries, Stonehenge was believed to be a temple dedicated to the earth, but at few archaeologists and astronomers began to notice something impossible to ignore. Their stones were not arranged at random. Every angle, every shadow, every opening pointed to the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. The evidence is clear. The main axis of the monument aligns perfectly with the sunrise on the summer solstice and sunset on the winter solstice. This means that, thousands of years before telescopes, someone already understood the dance of the cosmos with almost modern precision. The larger circle appears to function as a calendar astronomical, measuring the cycles of light and dark, life and death, seed and harvest. But Stonehenge wasn't just a scientific tool, it was an instrument spiritual. When observing the sky, its builders saw more than stars, saw messages. The sun was not just a star, it was a living being, a master of rhythms. The light, what guided the harvest cycle, was also the light that illuminated the soul. And here a fascinating paradox arises. The same people who worked the land with their hands' calluses were also able to read the cosmos, as if each stone were a book, and the together, a library open to infinity. The knowledge that united astronomy and spirituality was written not in words, but in stone alignments and silence. Archaeoastronomer Gerald Hawkins in the 1960s was one of the first to demonstrate that Stonehenge could predict eclipses and lunar movements. He called the monument of the first computer in the world. But maybe he underestimated something essential. A computer calculates, but Stonehenge contemplates. It not only measures the time, he feels it pass. And there is also the enigma of the exterior stones, arranged in a pattern that reflects the phases of moon and the tidal cycle. On full moon nights, the circle appears to glow from within, like if it were activated by an invisible force. Was it just a coincidence? Or a reminder of that human beings were made of the same material as the stars they observe? When we think of Stonehenge as an observatory, we forget that it was a mirror of the human soul. Each solstice was more than an astronomical date. It was a rite of passage, an experience of internal alignment. The sunrise between the stones symbolized the awakening of consciousness. The sunset, the return to mystery. Perhaps the ancient builders understood something that we try to remember today, that the sky is not, it's out there, separate from us. He is part of us. And when the sun passes through the portal of Stonehenge, what is reborn is not just the day, it is the being itself that observes. The monument teaches us that time is a circle, not a line, that yesterday and tomorrow are just reflections of the same light, and that understanding the cosmos has always been, deep down, an act of self-knowledge. Because after all, whoever builds a clock capable of measuring the movement of the stars, builds also a bridge between worlds. But what if this knowledge had not just come from observing the sky, but from something or someone that came from there? There are those who say that the real secret of Stonehenge is not in the stones, but in the look who raised them, a look that was perhaps not just human. Among mystery scholars, there is a theory that stands the test of time, that the Stonehenge's builders didn't learn heaven, they remembered it, that the knowledge they possessed about the sun, the moon, and the stars was a legacy of an era earlier, when the Earth still spoke the same language as the cosmos. In many ancient cultures, there are stories of masters who descended from the constellations to teach men the rhythm of the universe. The Sumerians called them Anunnaki, the Egyptians from Neteru, the Mayans from Bacabs. Would they be isolated myths or fragments of a common memory, a memory of a contact between heaven and earth? The English archaeologist William Stukeley, still in the 18th century, called Stonehenge Temple of the Druids, believing that rites of connection with the stars were performed there. Centuries later, modern research showed that the alignment of the stones coincides not only with the sun, but also with specific constellations, such as Orion and Sirius. Astronomical coincidence? Or a celestial signature left on purpose? Whatever the origin, one thing is clear. The ancients did not build Stonehenge just to look up, but to receive what came from above. The circular structure may have functioned as a kind of stone antenna, amplifying cosmic frequencies, converting stellar vibrations into spiritual energy. It seems like fantasy, until we remember that each human body is also an electromagnetic field, sensitive to variations solar and lunar. Perhaps the temple and the man are made of the same architecture. Both catch light, they both resonate. Some scientists have noted that the proportions of the Stonehenge circle reflect relationships mathematics present in planetary orbits. The monument seems to speak the language universal sacred geometry, the same that is repeated in crystals, flowers, galaxies, and sound waves. It's as if in each stone there was a formula, a vibration, a bridge. But who taught this to a people without writing, without metal tools, without accurate measuring instruments? That's the question that keeps echoing, like a song from the stars. Some believe that ancient civilizations inherited knowledge from much older cultures. Ancient, perhaps survivors of a global cataclysm that occurred more than 12,000 years ago. Others go further, suggesting that this knowledge may have come from outside, from consciousnesses that they walked among us before history began to be written. We may never know, but perhaps the purpose of Stonehenge is not to respond but rather remember, because every theory, every assumption, reveals something deeper, the human longing for understand where we came from and where we will return. If something inside you feels that this search is not just curiosity but a calling, remain. The truth about Stonehenge isn't buried beneath the cold Wiltshire grass. It vibrates in those who contemplate it in silence. And as we look to the sky for masters who have come down, perhaps the stars look back, waiting for us to ascend. But what if the secret of Stonehenge isn't just in the stars, but in the invisible frequencies that unite everything that exists? Science, the soul, and light itself. There is something about Stonehenge that cannot be measured by rulers nor explained by words alone. Legends. It is a silent vibration, a kind of presence that the body feels before the mind understands. Perhaps for this reason, modern physicists and engineers began to observe the monument not just as an archaeological symbol, but as an experiment energy left by ancient hands. Recent research has shown that the site has subtle magnetic anomalies. The compasses rotate, sensors pick up electromagnetic fluctuations, and the acoustic field between the stones create resonance waves capable of altering sound perception. Scientists from Institute of Archaeoacoustics in Italy simulated the interior of the circle and discovered that, in certain frequencies, the sound reverberates in an almost hypnotic way, amplifying heartbeats, heart waves, and alpha brain waves, the same ones associated with deep meditation. This raises a fascinating hypothesis. What if Stonehenge was built to induce states altered in consciousness? Perhaps each stone was part of a sacred technology that united sound, light, and intention, a forgotten science that understood that matter responds to vibration, and that spirit can be realigned by harmony. Modern physics confirms something similar. At a quantum level, everything is vibration. Atoms, thoughts, emotions, space itself. What if the builders of Stonehenge already knew of this intuitively? Geometry, sound, and solar orientation were used to tune the human being with the cosmic forces of the earth. Seen from above, the stones draw harmonic patterns similar to the waves generated by sound vibrations in liquids, a phenomenon known as cymatics. It's as if the circle was the materialization of a primordial sound frozen in time. Every monolith would strike one note, and the whole thing, a cosmic chord. This would explain why the place produces such a dense silence. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of an echo that still vibrates. Perhaps the rituals performed there involved chanting, drums, measured breathing, all calibrated to awaken this resonance. O Temple would not then be a place of worship, but a laboratory of consciousness, where body and universe met in frequency. The Druids, centuries later, still saw Stonehenge as a portal between worlds. They spoke that during the solstice the veil between the planes became thin, allowing a glimpse of the invisible. Today, physics calls this field interference, when two waves they cross and open zones of expanded energy potential. The language has changed, but the mystery is the same. Space can be alive. Perhaps Stonehenge's true legacy, GE, is to remind us that science and spirituality, they were never opposites, just two ways of naming the same phenomenon. The sound is the prayer of matter, light is the thought of God, and each stone, an equation that the time is still trying to decipher. If the mystery touches you, stay, because perhaps the greatest discovery is not in the instruments, but in realizing that each cell in your body vibrates at the same frequency that the universe observes in silence. And when we understand this, Stonehenge is no longer just a monument. It becomes what it always was, a tuning fork between the human and the infinite. But what happens when the echo of that sound passes through time and awakens something dormant within us? A memory that is not individual, but of the soul itself, human. There are places that seem to recognize us before we even know what we are looking for. Stonehenge is one of them. Whoever approaches feels something indefinable, a nostalgia that does not belong to this life, as if the body remembered a time when the man still walked side by side with mystery. Many visitors describe a sense of return, not to a geographic place but to a state of consciousness, a silence that seems familiar, like the interval between two beats of the universe. Perhaps this explains why so many traditions speak of memories of the soul, memories that do not come from the brain, but from deep layers of the being. Perhaps Stonehenge acts like a cosmic alarm clock, a structure that vibrates in tune with this lost memory. The ancients believed that the spirit is made of the same substance as light, and that certain geometries can activate what they called the inner door. Just as the sun crosses the stone portal every solstice, human consciousness also passes through portals invisible whenever you remember who you are. It is possible that the true purpose of Stonehenge was this: to help humanity remember yourself. The ceremonies did not seek to please distant gods, but to reconnect man to his luminous origin. Each circle, each alignment, functioned as a compass for the return to the center, the silent point where matter and spirit meet again. Today, when we look at those stones, we feel the same call. It doesn't come from the past, but of the future that insists on being born within us. The temple does not tell us a story, ancient. It reminds us of a wisdom that has always been here, waiting to be heard again, because perhaps the human soul does not evolve in a straight line, but in a spiral, returning to the same places with new eyes, recognizing in the stone, in the wind, and in the fire, the same divine impulse that pulses inside the chest. Stonehenge is, then, more than a ruin. It is a mirror, and what it reflects is the eternal return of consciousness to its point of origin. But what do we find when we go through that mirror, other side of the silence that the stones have kept for millennia? At dusk, when the wind slows and the light falls on the stones, Stonehenge seems to change state. The murmur of the visitors stops, and the circle turns into a silent portal. It is at this moment that the mystery reveals itself, not in sounds or visions, but in the realization that there is something there that is watching us back. Each monolith holds a direction, every shadow, a memory, and in the center, where the ground seems firmer, many report feeling a sudden expansion, as if the boundary between body and air disappeared. It's not a hallucination, it's presence. Oh, same type of presence that the ancients perhaps called divinity, and that today we could call it consciousness. The portal is not an object, it's a state. It opens when thought stops and the gaze becomes quiet, When we stop, look for the sacred outside and perceive it pulsing within. Perhaps Stonehenge's true secret was never revealed because it did not, it can be said, only experienced. It is the mystery that dissolves in silence, like the sound that dies to give rise to music. In ancient spirituality, the circle has always symbolized the return to the center, the point where everything begins and ends. To be within the circle of Stonehenge is to be within oneself. The stones were not built to defy time, but to teach us how to cross it. And in doing so, they reveal that eternity is not in the future, but in each instant fully lived. Whoever remains there in stillness feels the same as the first builders felt, that the body is clay, but consciousness is light, and that the purpose of the journey is not to discover what lies beyond the stars, but to remember that there is infinite in us. That's why perhaps the stones have been standing for so long, to witness the moment in which that each of us recognizes ourselves as part of the same sky that we once tried to measure. What if, in the end, we discovered that Stonehenge is not about the past, but about what is yet to come, the silent awakening of humanity? The sun slowly says goodbye, and the Stonehenge circle plunges into golden tones. The shadows lengthen, transforming the stones in columns of motionless fire. For an instant it seems like the world stops, and it is in that brief silence that something reveals itself. The truth. It was never hidden in the stones, but in the eyes of those who beheld them. Perhaps Stonehenge was never an enigma to be deciphered, but a reminder to be sensed, an invitation to presence. The ancients erected a physical portal, but the true portal is within. The journey that it began in the hills of England and ends within everyone who dares to listen to what the wind says between the cracks in the rock. Science calls it a megalithic monument. The soul recognizes it as a reunion point. Where time and space meet, they bend to allow the human and the divine to see each other face to face. And, when that realization happens, even for a second, we understand. We are not visitors to this temple. We are part of it. Stonehenge does not belong to the past. It pulses in the now, in every breath that becomes conscious, in every mind that awakens to the remembrance of its own light. And perhaps that is the true legacy of its builders. Not proof that mastered the impossible, but remembered the essential, the cosmos, and the human being. They are made of the same vibration, and understanding one is rediscovering the other. If this message touched something for you, subscribe and follow us. Your soul may be remembering the path. Then close your eyes for a moment. Feel the wind. Listen to the sound that is not heard, but that vibrates in the center of the chest. This is the same sound that has been echoing for 5,000 years among the stones of Stonehenge, the sound of creation, the same one that gave birth to stars and consciousnesses. And perhaps, as you realize this, you will understand that you have never been separate from the mystery, because deep down the temple has always been you. What if what we call the end is only the beginning of a memory that the soul still didn't you forget, and when everything falls silent, something remains, not on the rocks, not in the wind, but in the interval between one sigh and another, where time seems to bend down to hear what the heart is still trying to remember. Perhaps this is the true sound of Stonehenge, not the echo of the past, but the murmur of now, a vibration that does not seek to be understood, only felt, because there are truths that are not revealed in words, but in presence. And every time someone approaches that sacred circle, the earth seems to whisper the same thing. I'm here. I always have been. The builders disappeared. The rituals ceased. The ages passed. But what they awakened never fell asleep again. It's in us, in the way we observe the sky, in the way we touch the ground, in the stillness we feel in the face of mystery. Maybe that's what the monument really does. It gives us back the original sound of the silence. Civilizations take turns, theories change, names dissolve into dust, but there is something that runs through it all, an ancient, constant, loving pulse, a calling that does not belong to a culture or a religion, but to the act of exist. The ancients heard it in bone flutes, in bonfires, in the blowing of the wind. Today, we can hear it in the synapses of a serene thought, in the rhythm of breathing, in the pause between two heartbeats. The same sound, the same origin, Perhaps this is why the mystery of Stonehenge never needs to be solved, because it doesn't want answers. He wants presence. Want the moment when we stop looking at the past and finally become part of the that has always been before us. The pure consciousness of being. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself standing in the center of the circle. No name, no time, no I, just the wind moving, the air like an ancient chant. This is where the path of search ends, and the path of return begins. The return to what was never lost, the silent glow of existence. And when you open your eyes, you will realize that nothing has changed, and yet everything is different. Because the temple does not speak but responds, and the answer is simple, eternal and perfect. You were always the rock, the sky, and the sound in between. And then, the silence speaks again.